We continue through through this Advent season. I'm spending the time, the Thursdays on this during this season, to talk about and to tell the story, the Christmas story, through the eyes of one of the characters. And folks, this is fiction, okay? This is just a story. I had some of the comments on my last one were really kind of bizarre. That I'm not making any claims. I'm just saying that the church, the church celebrates the season of Advent, which is a season of expectation, and as we get ready to celebrate the coming of Jesus. And so, nothing more. I'm just hoping that you are blessed and that you are that you spend some time to kind of think through some of these characters and some of the things that took place in human history. So next on Digging Deeper, I want to take a look at the story of the wise men. My name is Gaspar. Now, I'm known to many as one of the wise men that gave gifts to the Christ child in Bethlehem. And so I'd like to tell you my story. It all began with a star. We Magi, or wise men, or even kings as we're known, are obsessed with the stars. Now, this fascination with the stars began in the beginning. Now, it's true that we are not Jewish, nor are we even from anywhere close to Israel. We live and study in Babylon. But we have had much interaction with righteous Jewish scholars, and their Torah account of the creation of the world is actually similar to our stories, but actually theirs makes more sense. For their account tells us that God made the world and all that's in it in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh day. Now, there's an interesting phrase when describing the fourth day in the book of Genesis. It says, "And God put the lights, the sun, the moon, and the stars, in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years." I mean, did you catch that? The lights were put into the heavens for signs. And so we have been looking at the stars for signs really ever since. Now, we looked and we looked and we looked, and for generations we looked, and then it happened. Suddenly, a great star appeared. The star first appeared during the reign of Augustus Caesar. Now, some joke that it was a sign that taxes were a good thing, that Caesar had been trying to pay for his expensive campaign in Egypt, where he vanquished Mark Antony and his crazy girlfriend, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, and claimed the crown of Rome. And I'm not sure if the star came before the news of taxes or the other way around, but I do know that they came at about the same time. Now, as many of you may imagine, that huge bright star that came night after night was to a group of stargazers a big deal. And so immediately our best and brightest did what all scholars do when something amazing happens. They begin to argue about what it means. And after many raised voices and probably a few hurt feelings, we decided that the star had to be showing us that there was a king had been born. Now, this star was so bright and it was so big that it must be a very important king. But just who is this king? Where does he come from? And over whom will he reign? And then I remembered something that I read from the Jewish scriptures. It had been given to me from a friend whose family came to Babylon during the days of Nebuchadnezzar and the conquest of Judah in the glory days of Babylon. It says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. And it shall crush the forehead of Moab, and break down all the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be dispossessed, and Seir also. His enemies shall be dispossessed, and Israel is doing valiantly. It's found in Numbers chapter 24. So could it be that could this king be the king of the Jews? I mean, it must, because actually nothing else made sense when we took a look at the data in front of us. No, we all knew that Herod was on the throne in Judea and that Augustus had given him the title King of the Jews in payment for Herod changing his allegiance from Mark Antony to Augustus right before Augustus's victory and ascension to the throne. So could there be a new heir on the way? And so we determined to find out. And so we made plans to follow the star wherever it took us. Now, once we decided to pay homage to this new king, we needed to figure out what gifts to bring. I mean, he's a king after all, and his gifts must be fit for a king. So what do we bring? Now, if you have ever felt the pressure of picking out the perfect gift, then you know exactly what we were going through. So Melchior, the oldest among us, he spoke first. So I'll bring him gold. Well, yeah, of course, gold. That makes absolute sense. He's a king, after all, and a king must have lots of gold. Now, so it doesn't take a genius to come up with gold, but you always want to. That's why you always want to go first when you're coming up with gift ideas. But gold wasn't enough. So what else do you bring to a king? Well, I somehow remembered Isaiah, the Jewish prophet, saying that this king would rule forever, and that he would rule, in fact, on David's throne. Now, David was the one who started the royal line of Judah. There hadn't been a king from David since before the glory days of Babylon. So therefore, I decided to bring him frankincense. For frankincense is used in religious services. It's burned and it smells nice. And it's supposed to signify righteousness. So if this child would be the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace that the prophet foretold, then frankincense was a perfect gift. So Melchior and I, we were set. But Belshazzar still wanted to find the perfect gift. Now, Belshazzar was named for the last king of Babylon. He was on the throne when the Persians captured the capital, and legend says that he disrespected the God of Israel by using the sacred goblets from the temple to drink wine from at a lavish banquet. And to make things worse, he praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron and stone with them. Now the story goes that a hand appeared and began to write on the walls that the nation was going down. And so Belshazzar's parents gave him that name to remind him that sometimes people do things that just don't make no sense. And you might say that Belshazzar had a lot to live up to. So he blurts out that I'm going to give this king myrrh. Say, myrrh, you got to be kidding. I mean, myrrh's a horrible gift. I mean, myrrh is used to embalm people after they're dead. We looked at him and said, Belshazzar, just what are you trying to say here? Now, as you may imagine, we were all in uproar over this crazy idea. But then I remembered something that was said about the rightful king of the Jews. Isaiah said that he would die as a sacrifice for all. That he would be like a lamb led to the slaughter, and that God would lay the iniquity of the world on him. The great prophet Belteshazzar to us, Daniel to the Jews, said the anointed one would be cut off and have nothing. So if this is true, then myrrh is actually a very, very appropriate gift. It's a perfect gift. So we were excited. We had the perfect 3 gifts for this special king. We had gold for his majesty, frankincense for his deity, and we had myrrh for his sacrifice. So we were all set, and off we went. So there was a full caravan of Magi on this trip. In fact, no one wanted to be left out. Everybody wanted to see this king that was so special that he had his own star. And we began to follow the star. And it went out before us in the western sky. Now we traveled due west for a time, and then we turned a little bit southwest by way of the King's Highway, and we traveled on the east side of the Jordan River, We felt that way we would stay among civilized people longer. We then forged the Jordan in a place that was very near to the legend, has it that the Hebrews first crossed under the leadership of Joshua. Now, we naturally went straight away to Jerusalem, to the palace of Herod, called the Great by Herod. After all, the king of the Jews must be a descendant of the king of the Jews, right? I mean, makes sense. Oh, how wrong we were. Now, you may imagine our embarrassment. We showed up on Herod's doorstep. Here were a group of scholars with expensive gifts ready to worship a baby when Herod had no baby in his palace. Now, I have to tell you that Herod was creepy. The stories about him were strange to us, at least. I mean, we know that he was a brutal man who killed his father-in-law. He killed several of his 10 wives and 2 of his sons. He ignored the laws of God to suit himself, and he chose to favor the favor of Rome over his own people. And Herod's heavy taxes to pay for lavish projects forced an unfair burden on the Jewish citizens. And he was not a nice man, nor was he well liked. Now, we all knew that Herod was just, shall we say, a little bit off. Normal people do not kill their own wives and children, and it seemed that the person who was in the most peril in Judea was actually the heir to the throne. But I have to say that Herod was the consummate politician. He was a brilliant host, and he treated us well. He tried to put us at ease and told us, not to mention the social blunder of asking for a king that didn't exist. I have to say that would have been wiser if we would have asked at the local pub if a baby had been born before going to see Herod, but here it is. So even as he smiled at us, we could sense that there was just something sinister just under the surface. So he called his learned men together and to ask them to make sense out of what we told him. And they searched their scriptures, and they found a prophecy by the prophet Micah that predicted that the ultimate king of the Jews would be born in Bethlehem. It's the birthplace of David. That does make sense. And so Herod told us to go ahead of him, to see this king, and then report back to him before we left so that he could go and worship him too. Now that seemed a little bit odd to us. It didn't seem as though Herod worshiped anyone but himself. But maybe we had misjudged the man. So we left Jerusalem and the star was still there, and it led us to the small village of Bethlehem. After which we thought about it, that's where we should have gone first. If this king was going to sit on David's throne, then it would make sense that he would be born in David's hometown. That way there would be no mistaking the rightful heir. Now the star stopped over a small house. Now I have no idea how a star could stop over a house, but that's exactly what happened. The light of that amazing star shone right on the roof of a house. And so we sheepishly, we'd already been wrong once, knocked on the door, and after a few minutes, a man opened the door to us. This man's name was Joseph. He had a wife. He and his wife were from Nazareth in the north, and they had come to Bethlehem to pay their taxes. And while they were here in Bethlehem, the baby decided to come just after they had arrived in the city. And we had a delightful visit. We swapped stories with this amazing young man and woman. Joseph, it seems, was a carpenter. And all he wanted out of life was to marry the love of his life and have a half dozen children and live quietly in Nazareth, surrounded by his family. He had a trade. He had somehow won the heart of Mary, whom he called the prettiest girl in town. And all was going along according to plan when his world fell apart. The young mother then picked up the story. She said, I was so excited when I was about to marry this wonderful man named Joseph, and I was so proud. And as I was making the arrangements, one day I was surprised by a man that was like no man that I had ever seen. The man told me that he was an angel sent by the Father to tell me that I had been chosen to give birth to the one who would save Israel and all mankind from their sins. So as you might imagine, I was a little bit stunned, she said. How could this be? I mean, how could I give birth to a son since when I was a virgin? This is impossible. But the angel told me that the Holy Spirit of God would overshadow me and a miracle would take place. That I would be with child, the child would be God's. I thought to myself, well, this is foolproof, right? Joseph will be totally okay with this. And then something happened that I can't explain. I felt that all was right with the world. And so I told the angel that I was willing to go through with this crazy plan. And I just knew that Joseph would understand. He didn't. I was furious, Joseph continued. How could she do this to me? And to make matters worse, what kind of fool did she take me for? The baby is God's? Yeah, right. I have to tell you that I was ready to denounce her right then and there. Revenge would have been so sweet. Then I cooled down and I thought about this young girl, this frightened, wonderful girl, and I couldn't have her killed. I could live with the shame as long as she lived. And so I decided to give her a quiet divorce. And then she could marry the father of her child. There would be some talk, but it would die down eventually. My mind was made up, and I had a dream. And in that dream, an angel came to me to tell me that Mary was actually telling the truth. She had not been unfaithful to me. The angel told me to take Mary as my wife as soon as possible, but not to have relations with her until after the baby was born. So we got married, and then came the summons to Bethlehem. They told us more stories of no room in the inn, the terrifying realization that the baby was coming while they were staying in a barn, of angelic visits to shepherds and uninvited guests at the stable. And then we then told him of the star that shook our worlds, and the long trek from Babylon, and how we decided on our gifts. And the thing that I will never forget is seeing the baby for the first time. He was both ordinary and extremely special. I don't know what I was expecting, but I do have to say I expected more. Here was a king, the king of the Jews, Messiah, the one who would save his people from their sins, and he looked so ordinary. But then I guess when you think about it, it does make the most sense. God came to earth differently than other kings. So we gave the small family the gifts that we picked out just for them. And I'm sure I saw that beautiful baby boy smile at me. So we left reluctantly. We remembered our promise to Herod to go back and give a report, but there was just something about that did not seem right. I couldn't shake the evil that emanated from that demented tyrant. So we bypassed Jerusalem and we hurried home. Then over the years, we heard some pretty amazing things from Judea. We were horrified at the slaughter of the baby boys in and around Bethlehem. And I still feel a little guilty that we didn't turn this child in. We thought that it was over, and then we began to hear about a miracle working carpenter from Nazareth who was called Messiah, the King of the Jews. We heard of his miracles and the amazing things that he did. I got word of his death and supposed resurrection at the same time. Judea, indeed, the world will never be the same. Many scoffed at this news of a man resurrecting from the dead. But I have to tell you, I believe it. I believe that he rose from the dead, for this was no ordinary man. This man's birth was announced by a star. Is that the actual story? Probably not. But there's enough in there that there could have been some things that were true. We do know that there were Magi from Babylon who came. They probably heard about what this king of the Jews was going to be because of Daniel and his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. that Daniel had a profound impact on the wise men of Babylon. So it would make sense that they would hear about this. We do know that there were some number of different possibilities for the star. Maybe I'll talk about that sometime. But the important thing is this, folks, is that God wanted the world to know that Messiah had come. This was not something that was just to be shoeboxed into a little story in a little backwards town named Bethlehem. God wanted the world to know, and he still does. And so I would encourage you this Advent season to just tell the story. Just let people know what God did to let the world know that he had come to earth, that Jesus had come. And I pray that you would enjoy this Advent season with your families, that you would understand that just like that first Christmas, that in and around that there was a lot of sadness, that there was pain and suffering because the kingdom of the world attempted to stop the kingdom of God. That hasn't changed, but yet we know that in the end, God is going to win. So I pray that you've enjoyed this story. Thank you for making it to the end. I pray that as you gather with your siblings in Christ this week and as you worship the Lord, as you sing those incredible songs, this will be the third Sunday of Advent coming up. So at least at our church, we're going to be singing about the angels appearing to the shepherds and just having an incredible time of joy. But I pray that you would sense God's presence, that you would hear him speak to you. And I look forward to seeing you again in a future video. God bless you.